Great, so welcome, fantastic to have you here. Welcome again to those joining here live in the virtual classroom on the Zoom software. And to those viewing the recording retroactively online, welcome to you as well. For our presentation today on Ontario Wine 101, my name is Malcolm Lamont. I'm a holder of the Diploma in Wines and Spirits, as well as a Bachelor of Education, and from the US-based Society of Wine Educators, a Certified Wine Educator. For today's presentation, we're going to cover two major topics on Ontario wines. First of all, the terroir of Ontario, so some of the aspects that cause the vines and the grapes to grow the way they do in Ontario's wine regions. And at the end, we'll take a look at some of the main producers of fantastic Ontario wine. But first, I would like to pull up a short video from Guild Somm. Guild Somm is the education branch of the Court of Masters Sommeliers. And they prepared in 2016 a short video, or perhaps 2017, short video on Ontario wines. So I'd like to pull that up. And just maybe a minute and a half of this video, which is accessible on their website as well. I hope you enjoy.
The majority of Canada's wine is produced in Ontario, but despite popular belief, only a small fraction is ice wine. Exports are limited, but other countries are gradually discovering the great wines emerging from Ontario, thanks to the region's unique geography, soil, and climate, moderated by surrounding lakes.
A lot of people have this misconception that we're the Great White North and we have polar bears, and Canadian wines within the local population had a very, very poor reputation because they weren't made with the right grapes. And then around 30 years ago, we started to see the first plantings of vinifera. And that was the game changer.
The French, the Italians, the people in San Francisco, they all grow up knowing they have a great wine region on their doorstep. Torontonians, Buffalo people, they've had to learn that because it's only recent that we've started to make really good wine.
We have ideal climate and ideal soil, and we're passionate about it. We like to make Canadian wine, and we think it's some of the best in the world, so why not go for it?
Ice wine represents half of Ontario's exports, but surprisingly totals less than 5% of production. The revolution of dry wines over the last generation has been a hidden secret, as much of it gets drunk in nearby Toronto, North America's fourth largest city.
Great, so it continues on for another 5 or 10 minutes, but I'll pause it there and pull back the presentation. A fantastic 10-minute short on Ontario wines by Guild Somm. Highly recommend you check that out on their website if you're interested after the presentation. So here we are in Ontario's three major wine regions, predominantly in the southern part of Ontario, around the Great Lakes, including Niagara Peninsula, which is actually an isthmus, but Niagara Peninsula containing over half the Ontario wines, as well as Prince Edward County to the northeast. On the north side of Lake Ontario, we'll talk about the significance of that. And Lake Erie North Shore to the southwest, predominantly focused around Essex and Pelee Island in the very southern tip, just south of Windsor, maybe a half hour drive from there. There are other emerging regions, including around Collingwood in the north, and even Ottawa producing some Vitis vinifera grape wines. We'll talk about a couple of my favorite producers from Ottawa as well. But first, the Niagara Peninsula, which of course is home to the Niagara Falls, along the escarpment, which is the same feature that continues west and will enable the circulation of the air, the warm air in the cooler months to come from Lake Ontario, and the cool air in the warmer months, and that circulates over the Niagara Peninsula. The wine regions are divided into 10 sub-appellations. So this is the Niagara Peninsula, and to the west of St. Catharines are 6 sub-appellations. The 3 top are the bench appellations, including Beamsville Bench, 20 Mile Bench, and Short Hills Bench. And these are just legally delimited areas, regions, that if the grapes come from entirely within that region, you can label with the smaller sub-appellation. To the east of St. Catharines is Niagara-on-the-Lake and its 4 sub-appellations, in particular 4 Mile Creek producing outstanding wines, as well as St. David's Bench for some of my favorites. The climate of Ontario generally is cool. especially Niagara Peninsula and Prince Edward County. It is cool enough in the winter to produce ice wine, but of course, in order to produce ice wine, you need frozen grapes, which means during the summer months, enough ripening and sunlight hours, which we get throughout our wine regions, to actually ripen the grapes and produce a crop of wine. So we can produce ice wine, but of course, we also produce cool climate varieties as well. And in particular, I like the Chardonnay, Riesling, and Vidal. Vidal for ice wine for the white grape varieties, but Chardonnay's of tremendous quality, and Riesling is tremendous quality as well, as perhaps Chuck can attest with his TAWS 2015 Riesling. And for red grape varieties from Ontario, I love Cabernet Franc, as well as Pinot Noir, some excellent value Pinot Noirs on kind of an international scale. And Gamay Noir, Matt Kramer of the Wine Spectator, when he came up for the I4C, which we'll talk about, would always say that we should be planting more Gamay Noir. And in the clip at the beginning that I showed from Guild Somme, Shiraz, Motti are producing some of the best Gamay Noir at Malivoire Winery in Niagara Peninsula. For wine styles, we produce fantastic still wines, ice wine, of course. A lot of it is exported, and in terms of Ontario exports to international markets like the United States, United Kingdom, China, and Japan, ice wine is still the majority of those exports from Ontario. And of course, sparkling wines as well. I'd like to toast to you with my TAWS sparkling wine. Tremendous quality. Again, we produce excellent Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And so in the model of true champagne, when these are blended and produced in traditional method, champagne method style, some excellent quality sparkling wines from Ontario. Moving on to Prince Edward County in on the northern shore of Lake Ontario. Does anybody recognize this winery? Feel free to just shout it out there if you can recognize which Prince Edward County winery this is. Beautiful property. And it's the Grange of Prince Edward County. Some excellent stuff coming from that producer. The climate in Prince Edward County is even cooler than Niagara Peninsula. So because it's on the north shore of Lake Ontario, it doesn't get the moderating effect from the northern winds. It's exposed directly to all those cold Arctic winds coming down in the late fall and winter. So as a result, they'll hill up. It's called hilling up, where you'd mound some of the soil from between the rows of the vines, as you can see in the picture, and hill that up to protect the tender vine trunks, especially around the graft. So this is a very labor-intensive process, but protects their vines, giving it some insulation from the cold, harsh winds and winters. And then, of course, in the summer or in the spring, sorry, they'll flatten those hills out as well. The grape varieties that I think are best from Prince Edward County are Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. No surprise there with their cool climate and limestone soils, producing some excellent quality. I'll talk about some of the producers of these top styles from Prince Edward County. But first and finally, Lake Erie North Shore. So this again is in southwest Ontario, along the northern shore of Lake Erie, so appropriately named. It's often shortened to LENS, L-E-N-S, Lake Erie North Shore. And there is an island. Does anybody recognize this island?
Pelly.
Yes, very good. Was that John? And John?
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Yep, that's Pelee Island. And this is out in the middle of Lake Erie North Shore. It's the furthest southern point of Canada, at about 42 degrees latitude, I believe, but very far south. And because Lake Erie North Shore is much shallower than the other Great Lakes, it warms up a lot quicker. So the region of Lake Erie North Shore is actually a moderate climate wine growing region rather than a cool climate. It's just a little bit warmer. And for this reason, their Cabernet Sauvignon and other Bordeaux varieties like Merlot and Cabernet Franc are first-class style wines. In the Ontario market, you can access them at the LCBO for a steal of a price. Often an aged Lake Erie North Shore Bordeaux style red wine will be less than $20, and it might have 6 or 8 years of age to it, and just giving some really lovely complex delicious style wines. Also, for those interested and for those within driving distance or a long weekend kind of thing or a summer vacation, highly recommend going out and touring around Essex and the Lake Erie North Shore area. So some of the producers that are producing top wines from these regions, here's a couple here on this slide, but I'm going to show 4 slides. The next 4 slides will have a series of wine producers on each of the slides, grouped by an organization that I have for them, and just to highlight some of the top producers producing world-class wines right here in our own backyard. So the first is a group of wineries called that belong to an organization called Somewhereness. Now, what is Somewhereness? It's an English word that also Matt Kramer came up with as the closest equivalent to terroir. So there's no equivalent for the French word terroir, which describes a sense of place and all the impacts that go to produce a wine from that place. But the closest English word might be Somewhereness. And there's an organization in Ontario of 13 wineries, the top 13 wineries in Ontario, in my opinion, that belong to the Somewhereness organization. So if you look at the screen, you would have Cave Spring being one of the pioneers, being the pioneer of Riesling in Ontario, certainly one of the top wine producers of all the styles they produce. Hidden Bench being an organic winery, producing delicious Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and other wines. Taw's Winery in Southbrook, both producing organic biodynamic wines. And another winery, Stratus, is a LEED certified winery, producing delicious wines in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And any of the producers here would be a safe bet, whether it's Flat Rock or Malivore, Westcott, 13th Street, Batchelder, safe bet for incredible quality wines, often at a good value. Another tremendous organization, phenomenal organization in Ontario wine is the I4C, International Cool Climate Chardonnay Celebration, I4C. And this is a festival that happens in Niagara every third weekend in July, and has been running for 10 years. Unfortunately, with COVID, won't be running this year, but highly recommend this festival for wines from all over the world that come to Niagara wine producers, bring their Chardonnay and other grape varieties that they produce. And wineries from Ontario like Pearl Morissette or Domaine Caylus, Ravine Vineyard, bring their delicious Chardonnay and many other wine styles as well. E-Cellars also producing a nice Chardonnay and nice Cabernet Sauvignon from Niagara-on-the-Lake. And Rosewood producing delicious Chardonnay, delicious wines, as well as mead, a fermented honey product. Finally, I'd just like to mention Niagara Teaching Winery, which is a college of applied arts and technology in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and producing some delicious Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and also there's a teaching brewery as well as a teaching winery and teaching distillery on the property. So here we're moving on to Prince Edward County. Some of the top producers include, of course, Norman Hardy and Rose Hall Run, Closon Chase, Huff Estates, the Grange of Prince Edward County, all delicious high quality wines from Prince Edward County. And on my most recent trip, I discovered in the southeast corner of a little bit drive out of the main strip, Exalted and Lighthall Vineyards with really heavenly Chardonnay and Pinot Noir from these 2 producers in particular. And finally, Lake Erie North Shore and emerging regions. We have wineries like we saw, Peely Island Winery, as well as Crew and Mastronardi from Lake Erie North Shore. And 2 of my favorite Ottawa wineries are Kin Vineyards and Edders Clos de Vouilly, in growing local wines here in the national capital. Great, so just in sum, Ontario is certainly a place to grow. But more importantly, to my opinion, Ontario is yours to discover. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed our webinar today. Thank you again for tuning in. Be happy to take, if you have any questions, we still have maybe 15 or 20 minutes with the Zoom software. So thank you to those who attended, and to those who viewed the recording online. I will stop the recording there.